We have 2 part-time paid staff, so that's myself and the founder, and then we have a team of volunteers. I think we've got about 23, 24 volunteers at the moment who usually do 3 hours.
So there's 5 of us employed here, and we collectively, our hours make up something like 1.5 of a full-time person, maybe a bit less sometimes. And that's not really enough. Ideally, we'd have like 1 person here all the time and more staff, but that's what we can afford. So yeah, and we all have there's 3 directors. The 3 directors have their own areas of work that we lead on, and we have 2 other staff that again lead on specific areas. So sometimes it can feel like we're all a bit disparate, but we do make sure that every 2 weeks we have a point where we all come together, and I think we all do work quite collaboratively as well as kind of on our own initiative, and there's a lot of trust there and a lot of overtime done that we in theory get back at some point. We've got 3 directors of the organisation, and one of those has been working as like an elected director, but she's getting actually officially signed on with our next confirmation statement when our next tax return goes in a couple of months. We just wouldn't be able to exist without the incredible volunteering that we have. So we have external volunteers, so people who just for whatever reason want to come here and help us out with stuff, which is great, and that's something we need to develop because we used to have more, and it is a piece of work in itself to like recruit, engage and kind of sustain that volunteering. So that's something that we really want to look at, and we've been doing a bit of work around. And we never force anyone here to like volunteer to do stuff because it's absolutely not in your like tenancy or, you know, license agreement, whatever. But people just really believe in the place and in the organisation, and that's like really heartwarming. What we find most gets people to volunteer is that we order loads of pizzas and beers afterwards. Which is lovely, and then we all have a nice time off, you know. And so, but like, and our upstairs newer studios, again, probably 10 or 15 people who consistently gave us a day or a half a day or even a couple of hours of their time of doing really grotty work of cleaning things, scraping paint off walls, like filling holes, like, you know. But it's just amazing to see people like rally around, and we couldn't do that without that.
So we're a completely freelance workforce. Our trustees, particularly Teresa Gledo, give a lot of time for free, so there is a big volunteer element, but not at the level that you might normally expect a volunteer to be working at. It's at the top level, but it's voluntary. And yeah, we have a small freelance part-time workforce, which can expand and contract. So when we have a big summer project on, we have a lot of freelancers that work with us every year, but might only do 5 days through the summer and the odd day on a school's programme, but come back and work with us.
So my partner Alice, who runs the shop, is around as much as I am because she's in the shop and she uses the space up here. But so she helps, but technically not officially. You know what I mean? She's my support, but she's not officially doing it. So it is basically just me. It's hard. It's having someone to bounce ideas off, because I know it annoys her quite a lot. And we'll walk in and it'll be like, we'll try and talk about things, and then it's like I can tell that it's hard because she's invested but not that invested, and having a couple of you I think would be a massive difference. So there's effectively a board at the top of directors, which includes a couple from Wakeland who are the developers of the whole area, and then Paul from the council, who's part of the Hull City Arts Council department. So that keeps the art remit and the balance of public and the council with the private developers, Wakeland. So they're effectively the directors, and they'll step in any bigger sense if we want to massively change things and things like that. And because there's obviously that pot of money, I think there's a sense that they didn't want to just be like, here you go. You know, they want to make sure it's being used correctly. So they're there for that, and if there's any serious things. And then we do have a steering group below that, which includes a couple from of the Feral Art School organisers who run the fashion and textiles but have their own things around the city. Admittedly, we've not really, now we've kind of got to a certain point, there's a lot less need for that. We're kind of just cracking on really. But in the last few years it has been more relevant as we've gone through things, and then it's basically me on the day-to-day actually looking after the space and kind of directing what it should do and where it should go and the spaces are like, and I can get input from them if I want to. But Wykeland are generally quite hands-off in terms of the what it should be, because I think they know full well they're not really sure. So, but they're just there if there's any big financial things, or if you want to spend on something, like when we're talking about changing the rooms around, things like that.
So cultural sector is very difficult with the whole PAYE and people on PAYE, I should say, which I guess is salaries rather than your freelance contractors on earnings, right? So here we have a mix. So I've got 16 staff. I would say 4 of them are on PAYE because they're bread and butter in the organisation. They need to be on that to look after. The rest of them are on contracts, genuine contracts for a year, so they know they're safe. It's not like, oh, I'll just have you in when I want you. But they are under freelance contracts. It suits them anyway. They quite like that because they can offset, you know, expenses. But also I've made it very clear that all my freelancers have got other stuff going on as well as Art for Space. Because if I'm just recruiting a freelancer and it's only for Art for Space, then really they should be going through the books. So, you know, it's another thing that HR department, is it? Which I haven't got one, but it's me. I'm very careful because, you know, look after your staff, just be HMRC compliant, right? And then think about what works for the organisation. So for me, having those freelance regular contractors, I know what they're doing for a year's contract. Then I've got a whole load of other freelance, what I call sessional workers. And when we get really busy, they're on my database, if you like, and I can pull them in with their expertise when I need. You know, interns coming through the door, our peer support workers, our community connectors, and our mentors and things like that, who aren't on the payroll as such, but absolutely crucial in our organisation. There's no hierarchy or value of people here.
We have got a caretaker, and also I've got administrator who does mainly the accounts, but it's you know, we're both part-time, so you're welcome to you'll recognise it all. We're a charity and we're also a limited company, so we've got a board, and it's, you know, it's just really, the board is basically the staff team. And, you know, we have the day-to-day responsibility for running it, but the board is all the skills that we actually don't have. And so, you know, if something happens, you can just, you know, you get free advice from the board. And I'm kind of guessing you'll be similar, will you, CIC? So really important. You get a really supportive board who've got as many of the skills that you don't have collectively as you can.
So in terms of staff, we are probably about 16 at the moment. That might shrink a little bit more from where we were a year or so ago, when we were up to 22, something like that. And that's really mixed across a lot of things, part-time, a lot of part-time in that. Anita coming in with a HR background, she led on people and operations at the New Art Exchange in Nottingham, so HR was a massive thing that we needed to come in. And the art hostel will probably take up 6 of those people in running that. The art hostel also relies on volunteers to run as backpackers provision, and that's kind of a recognised kind of model for people travelling and volunteering for their bed and board, as it were. And it actually has rooms built in there for them to stay in. I think there's eight more beds outside of the 60 beds. So paid staff, yeah, across very mixed. Spaces team working on that nationally. Again, we try to pocket off staff working on in different areas to be covered by that area, so the hostel needs to make money to cover it. Is the temporary spaces and spaces team need to cover income to cover their team, and that leaves sort of core to be sort of really funded by the Arts Council in delivering what it needs to do. So a mixed bag. Looking at how volunteers come in, how people access that, how we work with placements is also part of that and the makeup of that. The other side of it, I think, which perhaps may or may not come, people perhaps don't recognise, is also the makeup of the people taking the spaces. So we have, which can either do the work for you, or can be paid to do the work, or can collaborate with and work alongside, or actually work, because they're where they are, work on delivering the things that...
So our workforce is made up pretty much entirely of part-time technicians who are paid to the London living wage, and these the backbone of the operations. So there's myself and the techs, and they're the ones who keep everything working. You know, it's moving buckets, it's handling members' questions. We're a really excellent source for points of contact in the studio, and we manage all the firings as well. So we have, that's the internal team. We also have the teachers who operate on a freelance basis, and if we're the backbone, they're the muscles of the skeleton.
So yeah, we don't employ anyone. The idea is to get there at some point, because obviously I was employed all my life. I'm on a sabbatical from my employment at the moment, so I'm kind of like just floating about, thinking about the future. Because of my health and my child's health, it kind of put again different perspective on what I'm doing. I'm a teacher, so I teach full time apart from running Strix, but I've taken a pause and kind of to refocus my life a little bit and see where we are with different things. So both Anna and I are self-employed, and Easy, who works with us part-time, is also self-employed. At the moment we just can't afford to employ anybody and pay all the additional kind of fees that come with it. But yeah, it's something that is really strongly at the forefront of the future plans. Also expanding the team would be great. Both me and Anna are job sharing, so we don't work full time. And it's been like that for years. We used to work 1 day a week, now we work maybe 2 days a week. Yeah, it's challenging. We only have 3 volunteers at the moment. So they come to us through work placements. Mainly we work with universities, so we accept students on work placements, and some of them stay with us as volunteers. We currently have 1 volunteer in the cafe that just applied for the volunteering position. But with volunteers, you have to do all that additional work, because it's not that someone will just come and do work without any kind of support or developmental opportunities or anything like that. So we just really have no capacity to have many volunteers. And it's a shame, because we have probably a lot of opportunities that people could use, but you have to look after people, and when you're working part-time, there's no time. We have advisory board. We are now contemplating whether we should be changing into a governing board. We haven't established that yet, what will be more beneficial for us. But yeah, we have an advisory board, I think, of 6 people at the moment, and all come from different kind of areas, so we go to them for different things. And that's really helpful. Trevor Pitt, who's the chair of our board, he's been with us since probably almost the beginning, where we had no funding whatsoever, and I love him to bits for how frank he is and how many times he was like, just stop this. Or like, you know, he's really like, it really helped us. He really challenged us in a very positive way that allowed us to really step back and think about what we're doing. And the question, what's in it for you, actually comes from him, because in the past we were writing all our applications for other people. So artists want this is going to be for those, and he was like, yeah, but where are you? What's Strix getting from this? What are you getting from this? You're not working just for other people, you need to develop yourself and your organisation needs to grow. So that really was quite a turn in how we thought about what we're doing, and I think it really helped.
On the payroll now we've got 7. In the past it's been 28. It's been as low as 2, it's been as high as 28, now it's at 7. Freelancers, maybe we've got like 140 freelancers who work with us on a routine basis. Like subcontracted labourers within the events business, we've probably got about 75 or 80 of them who work on the events that we put on. So quite a big wider team, but the core team who's on the payroll is 7. We don't engage volunteers to do anything which is essential to the venue operating. 0. If we have a gig or a workshop, we swap a ticket to the gig or a place in the workshop with someone to just do the door for an hour at the start of the gig, and then they get to watch the gig, you know. But I don't like to use volunteers to supplement what should be a paid role. I don't think it's ethical. I don't even like the word use volunteers, you know, because it does sound like we're using them. I think that volunteering has got inherent benefits for people who choose to do it, but so often it can come wrapped up with this power structure and complex obligations which make people feel like they can't not volunteer. So you have to be really careful about volunteers being in a role which is integral to the day-to-day functioning of the business. So there are several things that happen with volunteering, especially when volunteers are in long-term volunteering positions which are integral to the function of an organisation. There becomes this thing of like, you can't manage the volunteer because you feel so obligated to them, which is really messy. Often volunteers aren't inducted properly, and often there's not a proper volunteer management structure. So you can't actually engage volunteers unless you've got a volunteer manager who knows what they're doing, and they should be paid properly so they can actually supervise and manage volunteers well. I don't think volunteers should be in any role which, if they stepped out of it, something catastrophic would happen for the project or the organisation. You'll have a bell curve of participation from volunteers, and it's kind of okay at the start, you know, to springboard a bit off that volunteer enthusiasm. True. But have a plan for how you're going to start to engage those paid roles in the future. Because communities don't think in funding cycles, you know, they don't, because you ran that gallery for 23 months, right? So it's a great thing that happened, but it's not inherently supportive to the like scaffolding of the community, the cultural community. It's a great opportunity that was in that community for a time, but unless it is there and is trustworthy and is like present over the course of decades, it's not a trustworthy part of the scaffolding of the cultural community in a place.
In terms of staff, we have, I work 2 days a week as gallery manager and artist residency manager. We have a technician, which is one of the new roles that was created with the Levelling Up Fund, who does 2 days a week. We have a studio manager who does 1 day a week, who kind of like liaises with the studio holders, checks they're paying rent, sorts out any problems, and also when there's empty spaces, deals with showing people around and renting out the spaces, keeps an eye on things. We have 2 people who are kind of our community engagement workers. They both do a day a week each, and that's another fund that we got from the Levelling Up. And have I missed someone? I really feel like I've missed them. Ed, who runs the cafe, he is our events person as well. And then Rose, our director, she sort of does a day a week from remotely. So yeah, so me, Jazz, Sophie, Ed, Cora, Cassius, Rose. we've had some really successful internships through Exeter University in the past, and one of our interns a few years ago, she came for 2 weeks and she ended up working for us, so for about 2 or 3 years. So, you know, we try and get volunteers and things like that, and working with Exeter University has been pretty good, which is interesting because it's not the branch down here isn't an arts university, so yeah, finding people from there is really interesting as well because they've got a different outlook. For a while there was myself, Rose, and we did have a bookkeeper, and then our bookkeeper got pregnant and went on maternity leave and actually chose not to come back. So then it was just myself and Rose. We all do more hours than we're paid for. We all do more hours than we're paid for. Like, for example, I don't work on Wednesdays. I wasn't here. I was in yesterday all day. I was working all day on Monday, like till like 8 or 9, and it's just like I'm going to be doing work on Friday as well, and it's just like we just do it. Like, I used to work at the university and there would be times where we'd have to come in at the weekend for open days and things like that, and I begrudge that so much. Sometimes I really do begrudge not being paid for, you know, doing more hours than we're paid for.